My name is Randy Eggert, and this is for the class, Bad Words and Taboo Terms. This time we're going to be talking about pragmatics. And pragmatics goes together with context. You always hear that expression, it depends on the context. But with pragmatics, it really does. Let me give you an example to illustrate. This dates back to when I was young, and I was a freshman in college, and some friends and I were going to go on a road trip down to Moab, Utah. So we were at my house, we were loading up the truck with all of our camping gear, getting ready for our big spring break road trip. And we had everything in the truck, we were feeling pretty good, and then out of nowhere, before we start off, my dad shows up just outside the truck looking in the window, and he says just one thing to me. He says, tent. And with that one word, I realized that we had forgotten to put the tent into the truck. Now think about that. That single word tent from my father communicated, you bonehead, you forgot to put the tent in the truck before you left on your road trip to go camping in Moab, Utah. One word communicated all that information. But notice how without a context, wouldn't have communicated much at all. If my dad just showed up now out of nowhere and said to me, tent, I would have no idea what he was trying to communicate. So again, it depends on the context. But since this is a class about taboo words, that changes a little bit. And I'm going to say shit depends on the context. Now notice that I spelled shit here with italics to tell you that I'm mentioning the word, not using it. And what I want to show you is that we can do the same thing for that single utterance, shit. That to understand what this little stick figure means by saying shit, you got to know something more about the context. Because there's all sorts of reasons that that little stick figure might be saying the word shit. And we would have to know something about what was going on to understand whether, for example, it was meant as purely an exclamation. And then if so, what kind of exclamation, right? Is he surprised? Is he angry? Is he upset? Is he, basically saying, oops? Did he just drop something on his foot, right? Could be all sorts of different things. Intonation would help us to disambiguate it. And the context. We need the context in order to understand what's being communicated. Now let's add a little more context here. Let's imagine that this little stick figure is actually pointing at some brown smelly stuff, presumably feces. And now the same stick figure is saying shit. Well, we got a lot more context now. But again, there's all sorts of different possibilities, right? He might be giving you a warning, right? Imagine that you're about to step in it, and that little stick figure says, shit, it's a warning now. Or I can imagine a case where it could be a reprimand. Again, thinking to my father. My father is a man of few words. So I can imagine that if he had sent me out into the yard to clean up after the dog, and then he comes to inspect my work, he would be walking around that yard looking around, and then if he saw some, he would have pointed at it and he would have said, shit. And I would have understood that that was a reprimand, saying you didn't do a good enough job cleaning up the dog shit. You can even imagine a more kind of fanciful idea. Imagine that there's a foreigner and you're trying to teach the person English, and so you're walking around pointing at things and saying the names for them. Tree, dog, shit, right? We can imagine all sorts of contexts, and with each context, something different is going to be communicated with that single word, shit. Now, I want to give one more example with shit. This is an example that I'm sure I've used elsewhere, but I just really like this example. This is actually a quote. The original context is slightly different than the one pictured here. In the original, I was walking through the Student Union building of the University of Utah, and there was a group of young men in there. I think about 3 or 4 of them. They were probably about 20 years old. And one of them turns to the others and says, "You want to go get some shit to eat?" And I'm walking along, minding my own business, and I don't even really think about it. And then all of a sudden, I did kind of this double take, and I'm like, that was a really weird thing to say, right? He was just inviting them to go eat feces. But of course, that's not what he was really communicating. In this case, he's using shit as basically just a catch-all, right? That can be used for absolutely anything. Like, hey, my shit's over there. Or, hey, can you pick up your shit? Right? Hey, do you want to go get some shit to eat? Right? Now, presumably, that guy, that 20-year-old college student, was not a coprophagist. Great word, coprophagia. Coprophagia is the eating of feces. And presumably the guy did not want them all to go into the restroom with him and partake of the goodies in the toilet, right? He meant, let's go to the cafeteria and eat some food, right? But think about how much you have to know about the context to understand that he did not mean you to take that literally in the sense of feces. And again, the context helps us to understand that. We're going to talk some more about that in future videos, but I just want you to start priming your mind about that, how much we use context to communicate more than the words can possibly say.